Well, it's January and you have a whole gardening year ahead of you. Probably you're doing some planning for this next year. And a good place to begin when you start planning for your vegetable, fruit garden, or home landscape is to reflect back on last year and see what you had success or failure with. An easy way to do that is to keep a gardening journal. And there are a lot of easy ways to go with that. One simple way to keep track of what you've done in the garden and when, such as spray schedules or planting dates, is just write it down on your calendar. If you have a calendar in the kitchen, that's an easy place to do it. If you have an appointment book that you carry with you, that's another place that you can write down different events that occur in the garden. Now, if you want to go a little bit more detailed, you could keep a simple gardening diary or gardening notebook. And this is one that I keep at home, and I keep a whole lineup of notebooks like this in our house. My husband's an engineer and he's a nut about organizing things. So we have one for the freezer and one for gardening and one for our fruit trees. Now the notebook on gardening has pockets in it where you can stick in old seed packets or soil tests, and then you can just have a running diary of everything that you're doing in the garden, whether it's planting strawberries or sowing pumpkin seeds, and you can look back and see when you've done those different activities. Another detail that would be good to keep track of if you want to be a good gardener in Oklahoma is rainfall. And we have a rain gauge out in our backyard, out in full sun, where it can catch the average amount of rainfall. You don't want it under trees. And every time that we have a rain, we just write down the date, when it occurred, the daytime or nighttime, and how much was in the rain gauge. And you'd be surprised how valuable that information is when you're trying to decide whether it's worthwhile to water a lawn or not, especially if you're watching your water bill. That's really helpful. Now, if you want to keep a little more detailed piece of information on gardening, you might want to start a gardening notebook. A simple way to get started is just get a loose leaf binder, put a few index pages in it, and maybe as you collect fact sheets or magazine articles that you like, you could start out in the front section on just simple general gardening information, such as how to improve soil fertility or trickle irrigation information. Then you could have a section on vegetables. Here's an article I Xeroxed on taking care of asparagus. Here's something I picked up from University of Missouri on how to grow beets. In your vegetable section, you could move on after that and have a section on growing fruit trees. Here's a little item I picked up out of a catalog on fruit tree pollination. It's a handy place to keep it. And then maybe at the back you could have a section on pest control. Now, if you want to be even more detailed, you could organize your gardening journal by areas of your home. This is one that I keep out in our Oklahoma gardening studio, and I have it divided into sections of the garden, or areas where we present shows to you. One is our building, deck, and arbor area. Another one is on general ornamentals. Here's our turf section, and in there I have some notes to myself on planting cool season grasses and such. Here's some notes on growing green manure crops in the vegetable garden. In the fruit section, I have our entire fruit planting laid out on a plan. When you're sitting down at your kitchen table and thinking about ordering different things, it's great to look out at what you already have in the garden. It helps you make some rational decisions, because if you're like me and you're getting a lot of seed and nursery catalogs in right now, you can get carried away with buying things. It's also a good idea, if you're going to keep a gardening notebook, is still have a section for a gardening calendar. Now, you can go to an office supply store and buy these individual tabs for keeping the different months of the calendar year separated, and that's really handy. If I want to look, for instance, back at last June and see what I planted in the garden and when, I could just flip to that. And you can change that out as the year goes by. Now, this is a gardening notebook I keep for fruit trees. And as we bought fruit trees around our home, we would just cut out and staple or tape onto a page the description of different varieties as they arrived. And then we can keep track of how the fruit did. Maybe if the tree had some problems, we can write it down under that variety and keep it straight. And at the beginning right here, I just wrote down a very brief outline or plan of the 2 rows of trees we have out in the backyard. So there are many, many ways you can keep track of information in the garden. The important thing is to just do it and reflect back on it as you order things. That brings me to our next subject, and that's ordering fruit trees for a home orchard and also some small fruit plantings. Now's the time to be doing that. By the way, you should also be getting your vegetable seed orders in too. But this week we just want to talk about ordering fruit trees. Now if you're new to growing fruit, a very good place to begin is the OSU fact sheet number 6229. This is the home fruit planting guide. And from this you can get an idea of what varieties of different fruits will grow in Oklahoma, be they apples, peaches, or grapes. It'll give you the varieties that will grow, when they'll bear, some of the characteristics of those varieties, the planting spacings, and anything you might need on that. Now you can either buy fruit trees from local nurseries, they probably won't have bare root trees in for another month yet, or you can order from different catalogs. The advantage of ordering from different catalogs is that you can specify what root stocks you want. And that's very important on apple and peach trees because the root stock that the variety is grafted to may have special insect, disease, and drought resistance that is helpful to growing here in Oklahoma. If you need a list of nurseries that you can order from, we have a list of fruit tree nurseries available at different county extension offices. It gives mail order nurseries, and also at the bottom it lists the root stocks that you should ask for. On apple there are two. One is Malling 111, that's a semi-dwarf rootstock that's drought resistant, and the other one, for small space, is Malling 9 rootstock. That rootstock will keep the tree very, very short and give you the capability to grow a lot of trees in a small area. Remember though, if you're going to grow very dwarf fruit trees, they need to be staked and they will need frequent watering. On peaches, make sure you ask for either Lovell or Halford rootstock. Those are best adapted to Oklahoma. One last tip, if you're selecting peach varieties, choose varieties that are disease resistant. There's a disease called bacterial spot that we can't spray for, and if you choose a resistant variety, you'll be one up on having successful peaches in Oklahoma. Well, thanks for joining us today on Oklahoma Gardening. I hope we've gotten you off on a good start and a good gardening year. Come back and see us next week.